Okay, so now in our journey here with AI guided Python programming, obviously we want to be able to access OpenAI's ChatGPT. So if you've never accessed it before, we'll look at that. And if you have an account, great, you're a step ahead. So we're going to go ahead and start with going to actually the exact URL is openai.com if you want to start there. And then you can just click on log in. Okay, so do recall openai.com. Click on login. And then in my case, I have a Google account, so I'm going to continue with Google. If you don't have an account, sign up. But for my case, I can just continue with Google. You can also do the same with Microsoft, with a Microsoft account or with Apple. So I'm going to continue with my account and log in. And then as soon as I do that, I'm already in here. So this is ChatGPT 3.5. There is also ChatGPT 4, but that is a more advanced version of ChatGPT, and it also requires an upgrade to the Plus model. In our case, we just simply need 3.5. That will suffice for the type of applications that we're trying to learn. So this is essentially the ChatGPT environment. You can enter in anything that you want here, and it's important for you to just know that this is where we'll be doing all our prompt engineering and our refinement of code, and using this system, this model here developed by AI for AI guided Python programming. So go ahead and access ChatGPT and make sure that you get to this page, as it's an important part of this course. So now we're going to look at setting up the Python IDE development environment. So IDE is basically an integrated development environment. Specifically, Python has what we call an idle shell. An idle stands for an integrated development and learning environment. So what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be downloading Python, looking at the environment, and also we'll look at PyCharm, which is another IDE, so we can have another alternative. So let's just get started there. So we're going to start by going to python.org. Then you're going to click on downloads. And when you go to downloads, there are different versions depending on your operating system, whether you have Linux, Mac, or Windows. In my case, I have Windows. So I am going to go ahead and install the latest version, 3.12.1, and I'm going to click download Python. Now, if you do have Linux or if you have Mac, feel free to download that version, and it should work according to your operating system. But once it is complete, you're going to go ahead and click on that, and then we're going to click install now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and let that install. And in the meantime, let's go ahead and download PyCharm. So in order to download PyCharm, you can simply just enter PyCharm into your search bar, and then under jetbrains.com, if you click here, you can go to download, and initially you'll be prompted with a PyCharm professional version. There's a free 30-day trial if you do want to go for the professional version. However, you don't have to take that approach, and by the way, it does support all the operating systems as well, Windows, Mac, and Linux. We can go back and we can just select other versions, and PyCharm is awesome enough to have a free community edition available. So we're going to go ahead and download the Windows version of the community edition for PyCharm. Now you can see different revisions. The latest release date looks to be here, the 25th of January 2024. So we are going to go with the latest and greatest. So I'm going to go ahead and select Windows, the Windows executable version there. And we're also going to want to download that. So looks like Python was complete. Let's go ahead and complete the installation for PyCharm as well. Okay, so click on next, next. And I would say, if you want to have a shortcut, you can go ahead and send that to your desktop. Also, there is an update path variable. This is optional. I would recommend it. You don't have to do this, but basically it adds a bin folder to your path. It doesn't hurt. I think it just helps. So with that, you can just go ahead and install that. Okay, so while that's installing, we don't need our web resources right now. It looks like Python is complete here, so we can close this. And now you should have Python downloaded. So if I just, start entering Python in the search bar, it will come up and it'll give you the idle Python um, app of the version that you just downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And upon clicking on this, you'll see the idle shell, and it is ready for real time programming. You can see the operator there with the three arrows that indicates that it's ready. So for instance, if I typed in help, there you go. Um, it's giving me prompt feedback, and you can enter in whatever programming command you want in the idle shell. The other thing you can do in the Python environment is you can select file, new file, and then on here, it will essentially give you the Python coding environment or development environment where you can write code and send it to the shell. So whatever code I write here, I can simply click on run and then run module. So I can just select run module and it will run the code and send it to the shell, or I can simply just hit F5 and it'll do the same thing. And we'll be looking more at this, but it is important for you to understand the environmental look and features of the idle shell. We're going to be using that consistently throughout the course, and we also will be looking at PyCharm. So PyCharm is pretty neat. It says here, do you want to reboot? That's because we requested to add the path to the bin folder, but that's okay for now. We can reboot later. So I'm going to click finish. Now PyCharm is really neat in the sense that it's it's more visually friendly, and it also does provide the features or certain features that the idle shell doesn't have. For instance, it's able to auto detect errors as you're typing it. If you're typing code and you stumble across errors, it will detect that for you. So anyway, once I run PyCharm, it's asking me if I want to import any settings, but in my case I don't. You won't need to either if you're starting off. So just click OK there. And once you click OK, you'll be shown the PyCharm environment. And then you want to start with a new project. So click on new project. And once you click on new project here, it's very important for you to select the Python version. Okay, if you don't do this, you will fall into an error when you try to run your first script. Now, you're going to want to go with what the system detects. So obviously, as you saw, I downloaded Python 3.12. So that's what it detects here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Okay, so that's my Python version. I also want to create a main welcome script. Why not? Let's get an example going for us here. So I'm going to click on create on the bottom there, and it's setting up your virtual environment and the interpreter paths, and then there you go. You have a sample Python script, and if you look closely, we are going to be learning more about syntax and what have you, but you will see that it will print PyCharm. So I can click the run button here. So upon clicking run, you're going to see that it prints hi, comma, PyCharm. All right, so that's a little overview of the Python IDE environments that we'll be learning with. You're more than welcome to use either or, but I do want to make sure that I present both of them so that you have a good introductory understanding of each for your learning goals. It's time for us to start looking at our first program. Okay, and that first program is Hello World. Now, Hello World is like a programming phenomena that's known worldwide, pun intended, when a programmer creates their first program. Okay, and basically all it does is it prints the string, the terms, hello world. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that with AI guidance. So we're going to utilize ChatGPT to print our first hello world program. So I've already shown you how to access ChatGPT, so make sure you refer to that lecture if you missed it. But essentially, once you've logged into ChatGPT, and you've made an account if you didn't have one. This is the environment where you will be prompting the AI, that is ChatGPT, to construct Python code for you that you can take and manipulate and tamper with further and refactor and refine and modify and so on. Okay. So for this specific session and the sessions to come in this series and this section, you're going to need access to ChatGPT, and you'll also need either Python idle or PyCharm. Now I'm going to show you how to do Hello World in both of those right now, but you will need one of those along with ChatGPT. And so let's go ahead and get started. So we want ChatGPT to create our very first Hello World program in Python. So you have to prompt it so that it's specific enough to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, write me a program in Python, and you have to mention the language in Python that prints hello, and we'll say comma, hello, comma, world. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And there you go. It gives you a very simple statement, print statement here, print hello world. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that code. There's always the option to copy the code here, so you don't have to necessarily like highlight it and do a control C or copy. I mean, you can, but not really the most efficient way. So you can just click copy code and it tells you copied. So then what we do from there is we open up Python, and I'm going to start with the idle environment. And if I just take that and simply do a control V or paste and then hit enter, there it goes, hello world. Okay, so this is what we just got from ChatGPT, and this is our output. All right, so let me see if I can, let's see, I was trying to see if I can modify. Well, I guess that's not important at the moment, but let's move on. So I'm gonna get back to that. Let's go to the Python. So let's go in the Python environment itself, where you can drop code in. Essentially what you can do is you put the code in here, and then you can simply select run and go to run module. Now watch what happens when I do that. All right, so run module, and again you can select F5 if you wish. And in order to do this, you have to save this program. So because this is now considered a Python script, even if it's one line of code, you have to save it. So I'm going to click OK. Yes, I'm going to save it, and I'm going to just call it hello world as one word, all lowercase. And I'm going to save that, and there it is. So as you can see, it says restart, and it gives you the directory of where the Python script is, and then it executes it, it runs it, and then you're going to see there the same option, the same output, hello world. So we can also do this under PyCharm, and let's go ahead and open up PyCharm. Okay, so PyCharm, and again, I've shown how to download, well, and install both PyCharm and idle in the former session, so make sure you do watch those if you missed it. Now, this is the main script. It's just like a welcome script. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to right click here. You can really right click anywhere, but I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to new Python file. Okay, so right click new Python file, and I'm going to call this hello world. I'm going to camel case it, make that W caps. And there's my hello world. Again, I do have the ChatGPT code here, so I'm going to take that and I'm going to essentially paste it. Okay, so if you want to run this code in PyCharm, you need to make sure that you select the script you're working on. So if I run it right now, it's still on main. So I need to select the current file that I'm on. Okay, otherwise it's going to run the main script. So on the current file, now that I'm there, I can just simply hit run or do Shift F10, and lo and behold, there's your hello world output. So it's just your first program and sort of just a gateway to using AI guidance for effectively crafting Python code in a very efficient manner. So more to come. So now we're going to look at user inputs and variables. This is an interesting gateway topic to what we're going to be exploring further, because it really is sort of the backbone of Python when it comes to seeking inputs and even providing outputs. The input function is critical in the Python environment, and with AI's guidance, we'll be able to leverage ChatGPT and have it construct effective code for user inputs and with the use of variables. So let's look at some examples. Say, for instance, you want ChatGPT to write a Python. Remember, you always have to mention Python. So write a Python program to, you can say ask, you can say request, you can say prompt. So to prompt the user for their age and inform them if they are an adult or minor. Okay, just something really simple. And then you can even say that if you want it very simplistic. So write a simple Python program to prompt the user for their age and inform them if they are an adult or minor. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter that in. And as you can see, here is a very simple program that will do just that. So you can see the very first step here is you're establishing a variable, okay, age underscore str standing for string, and it's going to say, please enter your age. And it's going to accept age as a string, which is basically like alphanumeric characters, and then it will convert it here, as you can see, int age underscore str. It will convert it into a number. And then it's going to do a check using an if-else statement here. So if the age is greater than or equal to 18, print you are an adult. Else, otherwise, print you are a minor. Okay, so say there's something that you don't understand about this code before you take it and input it into your Python environment, into the shell or into PyCharm. Well, you can simply ask it. So say, for instance, you want to understand what this is. So say, for instance, you want to understand what this is. So let's say, what is age underscore str? Okay. So as you can see, it says age underscore str is a variable that stores the user's input as a string. Okay. And it provides more detail, but honestly, just knowing that is sufficient. And you can read on if you wish, but the point being, this is how you leverage AI and have it guide you to Python programming. Okay, say for instance you don't understand this. Why do you need to convert it? I don't understand. What's the purpose of this? What does this step do? And again, I copy this and I put a colon and I enter that in. So what does that step do? I don't get it. Then it says the line age equals int age str is converting the user's input from a string to an integer. Again, perfect. That's just about what I need to know for now. You can read on if you wish, and it gives you a whole breakdown, but that's sufficient. So basically what it does is it takes the user's input as a string. Remember, a string is basically an alphanumeric line of characters, and then it takes that and converts it to a number that Python can use to do the check. Okay, and it does the check here. So anyway, let's go ahead and take this code. And by the way, anything with a hashtag preceding it, before it, that is considered a comment. So that's not any code that Python will actually implement. It'll just be there as commentary. So we'll take that code, we'll copy the code, and we'll go to our idle shell here. And so the font is a little small. Let's go to options, go to configure idle, and let's change the size here to 14 and hit apply, hit OK. Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control V, and I'm just doing this for experimental purposes. And if I hit enter, notice you're going to get a syntax error. The reason being is because the shell is a little different than the script, okay? The shell is meant to take lines and it seeks a certain format if you want to put in, like a whole chunk of code in there, like a body of code. you can still do that. There is a way to do that in the shell, but it's not the most practical. So the way you want to go about doing this is, again, you go to the script environment. So you're going to click on New File, and then here, where you can actually save it as a Python script, is where you want to paste the code. So once you paste the code here, I'm going to go ahead and click on File, and I'm going to, well, rather Run, and I'm going to go ahead to Run Module. And then again, I have to save this as we did with the Hello World program. I'm going to click OK. And here I'm just going to call it user input test. Okay, something simple. Save. There you go. So it just ran it. And as you can see, I'm being prompted for an age. So put an age there, 37. I'm an adult. Okay, let's say I wanted to run this again, and I run the module. It's going to repeat it. Say, for instance, someone enters in 16. It says you are a minor. Perfect. Awesome. So that's how that works. Now, let's try another program. Okay. Now you can say, now develop, or now write. Okay, and you don't have to say Python programming because it already knows you're asking for Python programs, but you can just write it. So now write a Python program that asks, or that requests the inputs, or requests the user's input of the, you can say again, inputs of the Pythagorean theorem. Pythagorean theorem. I may have, I definitely mispronounced that, or misspelled it rather. So Pythagorean theorem. So now write a Python program that requests the user's input of the inputs of the Pythagorean theorem. That sounds a little funky, so we can modify that a little bit. So you can just simply say, now write a Python program that requests the inputs for calculating the Pythagorean theorem. Okay, and run that, and it tells you the formula in advance, c is equal to the square root of a squared plus b squared. Now notice it imports the math library, and there you go, a small simple little program. It even gives you a description of each of the lines there. So in this program, this is what's happening. The import math, the math module, it basically enables certain functions that is required to complete this operation, such as the sqrt, which is just square root. And you can see that is used here. So if you're familiar with the Pythagorean theorem, which you don't have to be, but you need to calculate the length of the hypotenuse, for instance, using the Pythagorean theorem, and that does require using the square root function. That's why you need the math. You need to import math in here, the math module, which is just like think of it as like a set of functions in a library, i.e. saved as a module that you can call. So that's how the import works. But again, if there's anything you don't understand here, you can simply just prompt it and ask it, although it did give a pretty thorough description there. But let's go ahead and copy the code. And we're going to go back to our script here. And then now we're going to enter this. We don't need to resave it. I mean, you can save it certainly because we made changes here, but you don't need to recreate another file. So even if you wanted to, you can simply go here and go to shell and restart the shell if you wish, just to have like a clean slate there. So that restarts the shell. And now what I can do is, just to kind of show both ends here, I'm going to go to run, and run module must be saved. Okay, I'm going to save that. So now if you look on the bottom there, this is where the program starts. Enter the length of side A. So let me just take my camera off for a second there. So enter the length of side A, and I'm going to just enter 5, and I'll enter the length of side B, and I'm just going to enter 6 there. There you go. The length of the hypotenuse, that is side C, is 7.8102 all the way to the end there. All right, so that's the value. And that this is another prime example of how to utilize Python with ChatGPT as your guidance. So we looked at some examples there of user inputs and also variables. So if you look closely at this program, A is a variable, B is a variable, and it's accepting user inputs. So this is a good way to like use user inputs and variables in one, right? So A is the variable, here B is the variable, and it uses the input statement, and we're even converting each to a float. A float is just a data type that allows for more precision. That's why you saw that whole 7 point blah blah blah, right? Because it's a floating point number. If it was just like an int, it wouldn't have that much precision. Okay, float is meant to have more precision. All right, so that's an intro there of how to utilize ChatGPT AI guidance for user inputs and variables. We looked at user inputs and we looked at variables. Those are helpful for us to kind of move into this next section here. And that's because when you're dealing with arithmetic operators, more than likely you're going to be declaring variables, and it's more than possible that you'll also be requesting some input from the user. Not in all cases, but in some cases. And so let's go ahead and just start with the most basic. So say we prompt ChatGPT to write a Python program that adds two numbers. We'll start small. And if we want to just add two numbers, here in this case, it created a function to do that. But if that seems a little too complicated for you right now, you can actually prompt it to make the code more concise. Okay, so you can just basically say, can you simplify this code? Okay, and here's a more concise version. So without using functions, because we haven't gotten to that yet, here's two variables, num1 and num2, with two user inputs, input 1 and input 2. And then what it does is it essentially adds the two numbers once it has the numbers from the user. Okay, so now we're starting to build the blocks here, right? So creating variables, accepting user input, adding numbers, and so on, and all with the aid of AI. That's the ultimate goal here. Okay, so I can copy this code, and let me play with PyCharm this time. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new Python file. We'll just call it math tests. Okay, so we can play around here. I'm going to paste this code, and let's go ahead and run it. Oh, sorry, I have to make sure I select current file as I mentioned in the previous session. Okay, so now it's going to ask me enter the first number. All right, well, let me enter 20 there, and then enter the second number, 15. All right, the sum of 20 and 15 is 35. Great. Okay, so notice that we have floats here. That's why you're seeing the sum of 20.0 and 15.0 is 35.0. Let's say we don't want that, okay? Well, you can simply ask ChatGPT to modify it for you. So if you want, you can either be more technical and say, can you remove the floats and simply make it integers? Or you can just say, if you aren't familiar with floats and you want to word it like in a simpler manner, say you have minimal to no experience in programming, but you do know some math, so you can say, can you rewrite it so that it just outputs the whole numbers or the whole number? I'll just say whole numbers without any decimal point. So ChatGPT will understand what you're trying to say, and notice it did change it from a float to an integer. Okay, so we can copy that code, or I mean, just simply looking at it, the only thing that it really changed here was float to int. So you can simply go back here and change both of these to int if you want. And the good thing about PyCharm is it will detect what you're trying to do. So it'll give you options of things that come up there. Okay, so that's it. That's the only change that needed to happen. So once you run that, we're going to go ahead and enter those same numbers, 20 and 15. There you go. There's no more 20.0 or 15.0. It's just the sum of 20 and 15 is 35. Okay, so that's one example. Let's try another one. Okay, say for instance, now we're going to say, now write a program to calculate or say, let's write a program to convert Celsius input to Fahrenheit. Oop. Okay, I'm going to just change that there, correct the typos. So that's it. Just something really simple. And notice it recognizes that it's a Python program that you're seeking because that's what you asked it initially. And it's going to stay with that as the default. So again, I'm going to ask it to make it simpler. So make it more concise. Okay, there we go. That seems simple enough. Notice here it's doing, all right, so let's start on the top here. So input temperature in Celsius from the user. So here we're accepting Celsius temperature, that's your variable. Okay, enter the temperature in Celsius. Then you convert the Celsius to Fahrenheit and display the result. That's the Fahrenheit temperature variable there. And it's based on the calculation. So it takes the variable of the user's input, which is this, multiplies it by 9 divided by 5 plus 32. I don't really like that 9 divided by 5 there. So I'm going to say, change the 9 divided by 5 in the formula to its actual value. Okay, so I want to just change that part there. There you go. So instead of having 9/5 or 9 divided by 5, it's just going to give it to you right away, which is the correct formula. Converting a Celsius to Fahrenheit is Celsius times 1.8 plus 32. That makes sense. So we're going to go ahead and copy that code and let's play around with it in PyCharm. Okay, so, you know, interestingly, I remember back in college, I had this same exact problem. And, you know, it would take me like a good 10, 15, 20 minutes just to code this out. But leveraging AI now, you know, you can simply run this in a matter of seconds. So say I entered a Celsius of 70 degrees Celsius, that's 158 degrees Fahrenheit. Now that's hot. All right, so let's try something else. I can go ahead and rerun that again. Say I wanted to just enter 32 for Celsius, that's 89.6 Fahrenheit. That makes sense. Okay, so because we're also talking about comparison operators here in this session, I'm going to modify this. And what I want it to say is, please modify the code so that it tells you, so that it does a comparison of the user input and room temperature. If it exceeds room temperature, notify the user. Okay, so we're modifying the code a little bit there to meet our needs. All right, so room temperature is 25, that's correct in Celsius. We're going to accept a user input, so that's user input temperature. It does the conversion to Fahrenheit, then it's going to print it, and now here's the notification. So notice here's a comparison, right? So we're doing a comparison with the greater than comparison operator. So if the user input temperature is greater than the room temperature, the entered temperature exceeds room temperature. Okay, so let's go ahead and take that and run it. So I'm going to erase all this, paste this guy, and run it. So now enter the temperature in Celsius. I'm going to enter 20 for Celsius, and 20 degrees Celsius is equal to 68. So it didn't give me any prompt. Okay, and that's because it doesn't exceed room temperature. So if I rerun it and say, for instance, I put 27, here you go. The entered temperature exceeds room temperature. Well, what if I want to modify this so that It also informs me if I'm below room temperature. Also, I'll just simply say also include notification if, and notice the word if there, the temperature is below room temperature. So now it's going to modify it and it will add a line or a case if, you know, it is below room temperature. So here you have greater and here you have less. Okay. So you can take this code and, this is just the idea of comparison operators here. And if I run this, then say I put 20 again, now it's saying the entered temperature is below room temperature. Okay, that's great. So here we're checking to see if it's greater than room temperature or if it's less than. I mean, you can certainly do this in many different ways. Say you wanted to modify this so that, modify this so that it also includes room temperature as part of the comparison. So that just basically means that it's going to be like an equal or greater than. Let's see if it gave us or if it understood what we meant there. I don't think it understood what we meant. So here's what we're going to say. This is why the art of persuasion and crafting prompts is very important. So modify the comparison so that it informs if it is equal to or greater than room temperature. Okay, there you go. So now it understood us better, and notice it now tells us if it's greater than or equal to another one of the comparison operators that we looked at. So again, I'm going to erase all this and paste this one right here, run it, and enter the temperature in Celsius. So now I'm going to say 25. Okay, so if I say 25, the entered room temperature is equal to or higher than room temperature, but it tells me equal to or higher, and I want it to differentiate. So differentiate as to whether it is equal to or say equal to, greater than, or less than room temp. And you know what? You can just say room temp and it'll actually understand what you're saying. Okay. So you don't even have to type the entire temperature. Okay, so now it's checking for equality, as you can see, and it's checking to see if it's greater than, or everything else it has to mean it's less than. And I think this is exactly what we want. Okay, so you can always play around with it, and it's the beauty of using AI with Python programming. So here, if I enter 25, it will now say the entered temperature is equal to room temperature, because now we're checking for equality, right? So if I run it again and say I enter 26, now it's going to say the temperature is greater than room temperature. And if I run it again and I say 24, now it'll say the entered temperature is less than room temperature. Awesome. Great. Say I want to write a Python program that okay, so a Python program that outputs all numbers below 20. Okay, so here's a simple program that outputs all numbers below 20. Notice it uses a for loop here, but this still does have to do with arithmetics, essentially. So if we paste that here and we print it, lo and behold, beautiful. All right, so we haven't gotten into for loops yet, but here's sort of, a precursor to what's to come when we talk about loops. There are ways to do this without a for loop, so you can simply say, do this without using a for loop. Let's see what it tells us. Let's play around with AI's brain. You could do it with a while loop. Do it without looping at all. And this is a type of operation that you essentially would want to use a loop for. But here, this is another way to do it without a loop. So you can use a list and a range as an option. Okay, so that's just to kind of like show you what's to come when you deal with arithmetics and numbers that require an array or a list. So let's say we want to do something else. Say, for instance, write a program that calculates the surface area of a cylinder. That's a cool one. Okay, so that's the formula. 2 pi r squared plus 2 pi rh. And there is your code. Again, I want to simplify it. So just make it simple, concise. Here's a simplified version. So we're just going to accept radius and height, and then the surface area calculation is right there. 2 times math.pi, which is just a function of math, times radius times radius plus height. Makes sense. And then it just prints the surface area. Great. So now I'm going to take this and drop it in here. And I'm going to run this. And I'm going to enter the radius. So say the radius is 3 and the height is 5. I get a surface area of the cylinder that's 150.8 square units. Okay. Now, again, you can have it so that it checks for, it does a comparison. So do a comparison where it informs that you have exceeded 150 square units. Just say we want something like that. Just something simple. So again, it's going to say if the surface area is greater than 150, warning, the surface area exceeds 150 square units. So again, copy that code and drop it here. And we're going to run it again and enter the radius. So let's do the same thing, 3, and I think we used 5. Okay, so we're at 150.8. Warning, the surface area exceeds 150 square units. So there's a little demo of both using arithmetic operators and comparisons and kind of joining them with the aid and assistance of ChatGPT AI. So in this session, we're now going to talk about Boolean operators and how to use AI guidance to develop and acquire Python-based code with logical operators / Boolean operators. So the term Boolean and logical operators, they're synonymous. They go hand to hand. So you can use either or. As I said, they're synonymous, so either or is fine. But nevertheless, let's look at some examples of Boolean operators. Now remember, Boolean operators are the whole idea of taking multiple values and drawing a comparison between them. So you can even compare various comparison tests or relational tests, as we call it. Okay, so we're going to look at some of those examples. Remember, there are some logical operators that you will want to learn more about. They're good to know. Again, because we're using AI guidance, it's not absolutely necessary, but these are, again, just good to know things. But say, for instance, hey, you forgot what the Boolean operators are in Python, you can just simply prompt ChatGPT. Because remember, ChatGPT is also a means to help you learn Python further, right, for self-directed learning. So you can just simply prompt it, what are the Boolean or logical operators supported in Python or just in Python? Okay, and it'll just give you a list of each and explain each one with examples. So the first being the and, x and y, x or y, the not, okay, and then it'll even give you like an example of each. So if you have true and false, A and B, A or B, not A, right? So remember, and or not, they are exactly as they sound, which is what I always say. So and means that both of them have to be true in order to give you a true. Or only one of them have to be true, and not is basically takes an opposite relation, right? So if it's not true, it's false. If it's false, if it's not false, it's true. Okay, so let's look at some examples. So say I wanted some assistance here, AI guidance on how to write a Python program to check if a user's input is, and this is just a very basic check, less than, say, less than 10 and greater than 2. Okay, this is just something very basic, and we want it to be simple, and we do want it to use Boolean if possible. So you can see here, it didn't use Booleans, it used comparison operators, which is okay, but I can just simply ask it to use the and. Okay, so it says this program uses the logical and operator to check if the user's input meets, but actually don't necessarily see that it uses and verbatim. So please use the and operator verbatim. And let's go ahead and get that output there. So there it is, the and, as opposed to the former example where it didn't necessarily have an and, it just had the sort of the before and after between the variable, which is, you can do it that way certainly, but if you wanted to use the and, you're going to check if the user input is greater than 2 and if the user input is less than 10, and then if it is, then it'll print numbers less than 10 and greater than 2. Otherwise, the number is not within the specified range. So let's take a look at this in Python. So we're going to click on this and just create a new Python file. And this time we're doing Booleans. So we'll just call that Booleans and drop that there. We're on current file, and then we run that. So enter a number 5. So the number is less than 10 and greater than 2. Okay, so if I run this again, let's say I enter 1 this time. The number is not within the specified range. Cool. All right, so that's one example. So say I wanted to write a different kind of program. So write a Python program that will, and we're going to make this one a little bit more meaningful and applicable to, say, the real world. So write a Python program that will check to see if a student is qualified for a scholarship. The requirements are that the student needs to have a GPA of 3.5 or higher, and also they need to be involved in at least 2 voluntary, or you could say extracurricular or voluntary activities. Okay. You can even expand on that and say, or they need to have a GPA of 3.2 and be involved in at least 4 voluntary activities. So now we're just really expanding our Boolean needs here, right? So let me go ahead and enter that, and let's see what it gives us. All right, so get the student's information. GPA is equal to flow of the input. Enter the student's GPA. Voluntary activities. Enter the number of voluntary activities of the student. All right, cool. Great example. So check the scholarship eligibility of the student. So I love this example. It's using comparison operators. It's using Boolean logical operators. This is a great example for us to look at. All right, so you can see here if it's greater than or equal to 3.5 and their voluntary activities is greater than or equal to 2, or the other case, if it's greater than 3.2 or the voluntary activities, or rather, and the voluntary activities are greater than and equal to 4, then they will be qualified for the scholarship. Otherwise, they don't meet the categories for, or the requirements rather, for the scholarship. So let's go ahead and copy this in and play around with it a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and paste it and run. And then the first question is enter the student's GPA. Let's start with the 3.5 or higher. So I'm going to enter 3.6 here. Enter the number of voluntary activities. Okay, so the number of voluntary activities here, say, would be 2, okay, which is their minimum. Congratulations, the student is qualified for the scholarship. Now let's play around with this a little bit. So let's rerun this because we're going to get an idea of the Boolean logic here. So say the student is a 3.6 GPA, but they were only involved in one voluntary activity. What do you think is going to happen? Now, if you guess that they're not qualified for the scholarship, you're right. And that's because look at the logic of this code. The logic of this code says that they have to have a GPA of 3.5 or greater, and remember the Boolean logic, and have be involved in at least 2 or more voluntary activities. And in this case, yes, they do have a 3.6 GPA, but they're only involved in one activity. So that's why they don't qualify. Okay, so hence the application of logical / Boolean operators. So let's run this again. So this time the student's GPA is a 3.3 and the number of activities they were involved in were 5. So they do qualify. Okay. And again, let's look at one more example. So say a 3.4 and they were involved in 2. Nope, they still don't meet it because their GPA is what? Lower, remember. So because it's lower than a 3.5, what happens is the check goes here and it checks to see, okay, yes, it is greater than 3.2, that's true. But then you have this and. Voluntary activities also has to be greater than 4. So the first thing it does is it checks this, okay? And if this is true, then it's done. It's going to qualify you. If it's false, it's going to try again, and it's going to use, because you have an or, right? So it's going to go with the second criteria and see if you meet that one. And that's how or logic works. Either this or that, one or the other has to be true. And if both are false, then you don't qualify. Sorry. Okay. So that's a Boolean example there. Let's look at one more. So this is a fun one. So write a program that simulates a traffic light operation. Something simple like that. I mean, the concept itself seems simple, but actually there's a lot of code involved there. And you can see here it actually used, you know, while loops and time delays. Time delays are essential, and it used a function. So I'm going to modify this and I'm going to ask it to do something else. Rewrite it to make it simpler and use Boolean operators to code this problem. Okay, let's see what it does there. Okay, so it's using the while loop still, and I don't really see that. Okay, so use the Boolean operators verbatim. Okay, for instance, if the traffic light is not green or yellow, then it must be red. So this is sort of like a traffic light check test. Okay, think of it that way. That's what we're trying to do there. So let's see if we can get something like that. There we go. Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Something to kind of check the conditions of the traffic light. Maybe you want to check the quality of the traffic light, for instance, if you're a traffic engineer. But let's say, okay, rewrite this without using functions because we haven't really gotten into functions yet. So we write this without using functions. Okay, there we go. So this is just a traffic light simulation, and here are the different Boolean indications. So it's just a simulation. So in this case, it's making the red true. So this is a simulation of a red light. The green is false, the yellow is false. So if the red and not green and not yellow If all of these are true, then it's going to say red light stop. Okay, because that means if the red is true, in which case the variable here is true, the green is false, and the yellow is false. Okay, and then here's a simulation of the green light, and here's a simulation of the yellow light. Cool. What if we wanted to make those user inputs? That would be fun. So now you can say, can you make it so that the states of the traffic light, and you can even make it more specific, i.e. is red, are user inputs. Let's try that. That way we can actually just get the user's input and ask them what are the states, and then based on that, we'll get some determination, some outputs here. So let's play around with this. This is a pretty fun example here. All right, so we're going to drop this here, and let's run this code based on our prompt. All right, so is the red light on? I'm going to just say false. Okay. Is the green light on? And I'm going to say true here. Okay. Is the yellow light on? Well, false. Okay. Green light, go. There you go. Cool. All right, so I can stop this and say I wanted to rerun it. Is the red light on? I'm going to say false. Yeah, red light is false. Green light is false. Yellow light is, yes, it's true. Yellow light, prepare to stop. Cool. And you know what? It can keep asking you, so it's gonna loop and ask you again and again. So that's one way to do it. You can even enhance this code if you want so that it understands that, well, obviously, if the red light is false, and the green light is false, then it doesn't even have to prompt you if the yellow light is true. So you can certainly do that. Sky's the limit. And that's the beauty, again, of AI guidance and coding with ChatGPT as a means to facilitate this type of work. So in this session, we're going to be talking about if statements. If statements are a really crucial part of computer programming, and especially in Python. Python has a really interesting approach to using if statements, but just like any programming language, it works the same way in the sense that it executes a block of code based on a condition that has been met. So if a certain condition is met, hence the word if, so if a certain condition is met, then it will run that code that is assigned or aligned to that if statement. And if not, there are other conditions that may be supported in a subsequent fashion. So it can accept else ifs, or in Python it's known as elif, and you can have as many elifs as you want. And if none of those are met, you can always have sort of a default else case as well. Okay, so we'll look at some examples, but for control flow purposes, as a control structure to control the flow of the program, if statements work great. And you want to take the tools that you learn in this course and apply it for your own needs. I'm just essentially doing my best to give you, just hand off the skills that I know with my limited knowledge to you all, so that you can take it and essentially do what I'm doing and build your own programs with AI guidance. So I want you to learn to leverage AI, manipulate AI, control AI for your needs so that you can meet your programming goals. Okay, whether it's programming learning goals or programming drafting goals, design goals, debugging, you name it. So let's look at an if statement here. We'll look at some examples of programs using if statements. So say, for instance, I wanted to write a Python program that will generate a random number between, let's keep it simple, 1 to 5, okay, and allow the user to take a guess. Okay, allow them to only take one guess and inform them if they guessed it correct or not. And I'm just going to mention here, make it simple and do not use functions. So I don't want it to use any functions, just wanted to make it as simple as possible based on what we've learned so far. Okay, so here is a simple random generator number program using if statements or an if statement. So let's see how this was designed. All right, so import random, that makes sense. So it's just importing the random function or random module, and it's going to generate a random number between 1 to 5. So you can see it uses the random dot r and or rand integer int 1 to 5. So this is basically like a, think of it as like a random range selection function that allows you to select the range of random numbers that you want, sort of a window. But this makes sense. So this is your variable here, random number, and then this is going to select the random number between 1 to 5. Okay, so that's the syntax for it. And then you're going to allow the user to take a guess. So we're familiar with this by now. Here's your variable, and then here's your user input. We're making it an integer. You can choose to make it a float or an integer. In this case, we're doing an integer. It makes sense because we're only having them guess from 1 to 5. Now, if they guess the number correctly, and this is the if part right here, right? The if statement for as a control statement to control the flow of the program. So if we want it to flow this way, then it depends on if the condition is met, and otherwise it'll flow this the other way. So it depends on what they enter in, what their guess is. So the user underscore guess, which is the variable, is what the user enters in. If that's equal, if you recall, the comparison operator to equal signs is equality, checks for equality. So if the user guess is equal to the random number, if that comparison is true, then it's going to go ahead and print, congratulations, you guessed it correctly. Otherwise, else, it'll print, sorry, the correct number was, and it'll print the random number, what the random number was, and then it will say, better luck next time. So let's just go ahead and copy that code, and we'll go to PyCharm again this time, and we're going to go to new Python file, and we'll call it random guess game or something like that. Okay, and let's go ahead and drop that code and let's run it. All right, so you can see here on the bottom, it's going to prompt you guess the number between 1 to 5. I'm just going to take a wild guess, enter in 2. It was wrong. Sorry, the correct number was 5. Better luck next time. Let me try to run it again. Let's see how many times I can get it wrong. So I got it wrong again. All right, let's try like maybe 1 or 2 more times, but we don't necessarily have to get it right. I'll enter 1, and I got it wrong again. All right, last time, and I'm gonna enter a 4. Oh, darn. Okay, well, you get the idea. So guess the number between 1 to 5, and if you do get it right, it will prompt you that, hey, congratulations, you guessed it correctly. So you got to play with it a few times, obviously, to get your desired output. It's part of the game. I just basically created a simple game with the help of AI, right? Random number generator game. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's try another program. So say, for instance, I wanted a program that would say, check if a character entered by user is either lowercase or uppercase. Inform them if it is lower or uppercase. So we want them to be informed. So just a simple program in Python that'll handle that. Okay, now this is cool. So this is a great usage of control structure here using ifs, and it's actually even doing a nested if, which is a bit of a unique way to program. Now there are other ways to do this, obviously, and we can ask ChatGPT to enhance this code, but again, just for simplicity, so that we can also learn Python as we go along, we want to look at basic structures. Okay, so user input is equal to input enter a character. So again, this is what the user is going to enter in, and it's going to check the length to see if it's a character. And if it's not, it will let them know, please enter a single character. That's what the outer if statement is doing. So you can see there's an outer if statement, if and else. So that's just checking to see if they did enter one character, because remember, we're checking to see if a character, a single character, is lowercase or uppercase. So if the case is that they entered a single character, it's going to proceed. Otherwise, it'll tell them, hey, please enter a single character. And we're going to run this and see how it looks like anyway. But anyway, so say they entered in a single character, then it's going to check to see if it's lower, and there's a function for that. It's dot is lower, so you take the variable dot is lower and it'll tell you if it's lower. Okay, it'll basically, it's a Boolean check, so if it is lower, then it's going to print the entered character user input is lowercase. Otherwise, elif, it's going to check if it's upper, and if it is, then it'll let them know that that character inputted was an uppercase, and then the else is it's neither a lowercase nor uppercase, which means it's not a letter. Okay, so let's play around with this code a little bit and have fun with it. So we'll go here. I'm going to go ahead and create another new Python file, and this time we'll call it character check. Okay, so our character check program, going to go ahead and run the current file. So enter a character. I'm going to enter a capital A. So upon entering a capital A, the entered character A is uppercase. Cool. Let's rerun that. And this time I'm going to enter a lowercase c. The entered character C is lowercase. Let's run again. This time I'm going to put in multiple characters. So say I enter Bob. Please enter only a single character. So the program that ChatGPT gave us is intelligent enough to detect that, it's only required. It basically only more than a single character was entered, and that we only require a single character, because that was part of our prompt, right? We did mention character. So specificity is very important when you're prompting ChatGPT, especially for AI guided Python programming. So you want to make sure you're as specific as possible. All right, so if we run this one more time and say I enter in like a $sign, it's going to say the entered character $sign is not a letter. So you can see we've exhausted all the conditions, but the point being here is understanding control structures and how you can execute certain parts of your code depending on conditions that are met. This is a very popular algorithm that's used all around. All right, so create a Python program that works as a login by accepting a username and password from a user. Make it so that the username is we'll say PyStudent is the username. We'll camel case it. And the password is, we'll call it AI Python. We'll say AI Python 2024. Enter. All right. All right, so here's a Python program that will act as a login system with a predefined username and password. Okay. Awesome. So here's a predefined username and password. So the correct username is PyStudent, standing for Python student. The correct password is AI Python 2024. Notice it is case sensitive because that's how login information is. So this takes the username or the user input rather, for username and password. So these are your variables: enter username, enter password, and it accepts both inputs. And then it takes those inputs and processes them under this if statement. So the if statement will check if the entered username is equal to the correct username, and recall Boolean operators, right? And if the entered password is equal to the correct password. So both of those conditions have to be true. As you recall, that's how the AND logic Boolean logical operator works, right? So you have to have the correct username and you have to have the correct password. And this is exactly how login algorithms work, regardless of where you try to sign in on any of your social media platforms or blogs or whatever it is, you know, anywhere where you need to log in, even in your Windows, you're having to deal with this backend algorithm, okay? And you will have an if and it'll tell you login successful, welcome, Pi student, else login failed, incorrect username or password. So let's go ahead and copy that code. And we will create another Python file and we'll call it login program. Then here we will run this code. So enter your username. So I'm going to go ahead and put the username. Remember, it is camel case and it is case sensitive. Enter that. And I'm going to type in AI Python 2023. I put in the wrong password on purpose. And notice it says login failed, incorrect username or password. So if I run that again, this time I'm going to put in the correct credentials. Pi student, AI Python 2024. There you go. Login successful. Welcome, Pi student. So there you have it. Some demonstrations of how to use the if statement practically under AI guided Python programming. Stay tuned for more. So now we're going to be looking at loops. We're going to be looking at the concept of iteration. So basically a loop is the process in programming. It's the process of repeating code. So you can take a block of code and run it repeatedly. And those are known as iterations. So depending on the type of loop that you run, you can either have a for loop, for instance, that runs a known number of iterations. That's typically what for loops are used for. Or you can use a while loop. And a while loop is basically a loop that will continue to run until a condition has been acquired or has been satisfied. A condition has been met. So that's the main difference between a for loop and a while loop. The for loop will run no number of times. So if you know how many times you want to run a process, you're going to use a for loop. Whereas if you're not sure how many times you want to run a specific process, then you're going to want to use a while loop because it will run and iterate until a condition has been met. So that said, let's just look at some basic examples of for loops and while loops. We'll start there. And then what I'd like to do is go back to the previous, the examples that we executed in the previous session and the if statements, take those examples, like for instance, the login program, the random guessing number program, and so on, the character check program, and I want to make them so that they iterate, okay, so that they use loops. But let's start simple. So let's have ChatGPT write us a program that will that will print all odd numbers less than 20. Okay, and make sure to mention Python as usual. So write a Python program that will print all numbers less than 20. So here's a simple Python program that prints all odd numbers less than 20. So you can see that it just simply says for, and this is the for loop, obviously. So for number in range 1, 20, 2. So this is the starting point, this is the ending point, and then this is the step size. Okay, so that's how many, for each time that it prints, it will step from there. So it'll start with 1 and then it'll step 2, it'll print 3 and then 5 and so on, 7, etc. So let's go ahead and copy that code. And we'll go to PyCharm. I just created this loop tests here where we can try different tests for loops. So there you go. As soon as I run it, it goes ahead and prints all numbers that are less than 20. Okay, that's the power of using loops. In this case specifically, we used a for loop because we do know how many times we want to iterate. We want to iterate as many times as it takes to satisfy the event. In this case, all values that are below 20, all odd values, odd numbers below 20. So say for instance, I wanted to use the while loop. So create a program that will prompt the user to enter a student's name and will continue to do so until they enter in end. Okay, so let's see there, simple Python program that will take care of that. So here's a good example of a while loop. Okay, so while true, student's name, input, enter student's name. So this is just like, you know, sort of initializing in a sense. So the student's name is equal to whatever they enter in. And if the student's name is end in caps, then it's going to break the code. And what that means is it'll break the while loop. That's what the break function is used for. It terminates the while loop. Okay. And then interestingly, we do have a for at the end here that will actually print the list of students at the end. That's pretty cool. So this program here is sort of an integration of while and for loop in one program. So let's try that here and let's run it. So enter a student's name. Okay, so say for instance we enter Josh and we'll enter Mike. We'll enter say Alex and we'll enter Jenna and we'll enter I think that's good enough. Say Mo and maybe one more, Elizabeth, and we'll put an end here. Okay, just random names. So you can see after entering in all of the students' name. Now imagine a teacher utilizing this and them having to enter this information in so that it could populate a spreadsheet or something like that, right? This would be the first step to doing so. So if you want to like auto-populate a list or some kind of spreadsheet, export it as a file or what have you. So here's the list of all the students. And once I did enter end, as you can see, it says in parentheses or type end to finish. Once I did that, it terminates the while loop. And that's the difference. That's the, you can say that's the main difference between the for loop and a while loop. Okay, that's the primary difference. Now, let's go back and revise the former programs that we were working on in the if statement lecture. We looked at about 2 or 3 different programs there. One was, for instance, the login program. We'll start with that. So we did have this login program, if you recall. And if you just happen to jump to this video, I recommend you go back and look at the if statement lecture because this course is designed sequentially. But nevertheless, what we did is we predefined a username and password. So you can see here under this variable, you have the PyStudent and the password is AI Python 2024. We accept 2 user inputs for username and password. And then we check to see if they entered the correct username and the correct password. In which case, if they did, we'll prompt them and inform them, hey, the login was successful, welcome. Or, hey, the login failed, it's the incorrect username or password. And this is the typical algorithm that most platforms use nowadays, right? When you go to log in anywhere. So anyway, let's go to, if we go to PyCharm here and then we go to the login program, you'll notice that this is still here. So if I ran it right now and I enter in PyStudent and I enter in AI Python 2024, the behavior is, okay, login successful, right? That's a successful case. So say for instance, though, I enter PyStudent and then I enter in AI Python 2020. Okay, if I enter that, it's going to say login failed. But usually in most cases, if you notice with any login program, it allows you to provide multiple attempts, right? So there's multiple attempts built into it. So let's do that, right? In order to do that, you need to incorporate the concept of loops. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask ChatGPT to modify the login program to allow the user a maximum of 3 attempts. Inform them that their account is locked if they exceed the attempts. Or you can just say, to be specific, the 3 attempts. All right, so it's going to modify that and basically give us an enhanced version based on what we're looking for. It's going to have to use loops in order to make this happen properly because obviously we are doing this multiple times. Now, it makes a lot of sense as to why it's using the while loop and not the for loop. And if you think about it, it's because you don't know how many times you have to iterate this, right? I mean, you can iterate this a number of times because there could be multiple case scenarios here. Let's take a look and play around with it to understand it better. But you allow the user a maximum of 3 login attempts. Now, sure, it is a maximum of 3 login attempts, but at the same time, things can vary. So let's go ahead and drop this in here. So we're going to go and enter this in. So enter the username. So we're going to say Pi student. And we're going to say AI Python 2020. So it says the login failed. Okay. And again, I'm going to say this time I just enter Pi without the student. And I just enter any jargon in here. It's going to say the login failed. It does say you have 1 attempt left. So say, for instance, I now put in the correct password, 2024. Login successful, okay? So the reason why it's important to use the while loop here is because you're not exactly sure if you're going to take 1 attempt, 2 attempts, or 3 attempts. Do you know what I mean? You're not 100% sure as to how many times you're going to iterate. It's actually based on a condition. It's based on whether the user gets the username and password information correct or not. So that's why it makes more sense to use the while loop in this case, okay? But ultimately, your account will be locked if you ran it more than 3 times. So I'm just going to enter a bunch of jargon for each just so you can see what happens. Hey, look, it says egg there. Okay, there you go. So I just entered a bunch of jargon. Account locked, too many unsuccessful login attempts. Cool. I mean, not cool if that were to really happen to you, but cool for our demonstration here. Okay, so all right, so that's one enhancement here, taking this code and modifying it so that it incorporates repetition and loops. Let's try the other 1 or 2 examples that we looked at. So this one was interesting. We enter a character and we check to see if the single character that was entered was either a lowercase or an uppercase. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a ChatGPT to modify this so that, again, kind of the same thing, to give you a maximum of 3 attempts and also lock you out if you don't enter in a character. Okay, so modify the single character uppercase lowercase program. It's going to know what you're talking about. It's still in memory so that it will run for a maximum amount of 3 attempts for the user to enter in a single character. If they do not enter in a single character, then terminate the program. Then terminate, you can say even the loop if you want to be specific and inform them. Okay, so it's going to know what you're talking about there. So it will take that and modify, and you can already guess that it's going to use the while loop as well, similar to the login program, but just to give you another example to relate with. But most of the code is the same, except you just have that while loop there and additional code to check the attempts and to check for the max attempts on the bottom there. If the attempts is equal to the maximum attempts, then too many unsuccessful attempts, exiting the program. Okay, so copy that code and go back here, and let's drop that. We probably should be under character check actually. Let me bring that back. So under character check, so the character check program, go ahead and run that, enter a single character. I'm just going to enter multiple characters multiple times, and there you go, too many unsuccessful attempts, exiting the program. But as long as I behave and I enter in a single character, it will do so. Now, let's modify this so that it will continue to allow me to enter as many single characters as I want until I enter in stop, for instance. Okay, so I'm going to say, great. Now modify it so that it also includes the ability to enter in as many yeah, to enter the ability to keep checking for characters until the user enters in stop. So let's see if it gets what we mean there, but it should, and it will expand on the while loop there. Ideally, we should have, so it should actually take that and drop it into the while loop, and we should be able to test this out. Still with the same capability where it's checking for maximum attempts as well. So it looks like that's done there. So let's go ahead and copy that code and go back here. And we're going to run this. So we go ahead and run that now. So enter a single character, B, D, L. So now we can enter in as many as we want until we hit or we enter stop. Awesome, perfect. And then if we rerun this, D, Q, F, S, all right. And say for instance, I start entering in multiple stuff. I like that. So now it says invalid input, please enter only a single character or stop. All right, too many attempts, unsuccessful attempts, exiting a program. This is great. So you can see it's the process of refinement, and those are concepts that we'll continue to expand on throughout the course. But yeah, so you can take any program and continue to enhance it as such. The login program we looked at the single character entry program. There's also the random number generator program, so we can also play around with that. But let's do this. Let's try. We can do the same thing here as well, and we can have it so that it checks. So we can say update the random number program so that it allows you as many attempts as you want, okay, until they guess the correct number. So we're just going to modify that program a little bit, because honestly, if you noticed in my last video, I tried like 3-4 times, and I had to kind of rerun it every time, and it was getting annoying. So if I just put a loop in there, I can just try it as many times as I want, and it'll make my life a lot easier. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to copy this code, and we're going to enhance the random guess game. Okay, and we're going to run this. Okay, so now I can go ahead and continue trying. Yes, I got it. All right. So the random number in this case was 5. Congratulations, you guessed it correctly. It took me 3 times this time. But you see, with loops, now you have an actual game where you can keep trying. You can expand on this and make it, guess the number from 1 to 10, 1 to 100, whatever you want to do. Again, the sky's the limit. There's an infinite amount of possibilities here when you're dealing with programming, and especially when you bring in the concept of loops.
Okay, so now we want to look at how to create a math-based GUI using Kinter. Now, basically, Kinter is like a GUI toolkit that's built into Python. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to call it, or not we, but AI will. So using AI generation, we're going to essentially use Kinter and develop a calculator-based program. Now, this is just to showcase that with AI guidance, you can create whatever GUI you want. So this is just one example, but there are literally tons upon tons of examples that you can create. There's so many different types and flavors of GUIs that you can create using AI generation. So I'm going to show you one example. We're going to create a simple calculator program, and we're going to make sure that it gives us a GUI for it, that the AI handles that, and we'll integrate it into um, an IDE, in this case PyCharm, and we'll look at how it works. So let's get right into it. So essentially, if you want to do this, what you're going to do is you're going to prompt ChatGPT with the following or equivalent. So you're going to say something to the likes of, please provide the Python code that would generate a basic calculator GUI. So something like that is sufficient. So please provide the Python code that would generate a basic calculator GUI. Okay, we're going to go ahead and enter that. And as soon as I enter this, notice the first thing that it says is, sure, you can create a basic calculator GUI using Kinter or using the Kinter library in Python. And here's a simple example code. So you can see here very clearly, the first thing that it does do is it imports Kinter as TK. Okay, so that's what it's going to call it throughout to basically call the GUI, activate as necessary, set whatever parameters to the GUI, and so on. And you can see here, all the steps. You can even get a look of the buttons that it defines in the calculator and how it adds it to the grid and so on. Now, if there's any part of the code that you want further elaboration on, you can simply prompt it. But for the purpose of this, what we want to do is just copy that code for now. And then we're going to go ahead and launch PyCharm. You can also do this in Python idle if you wish, and it will run the same way. But we're just going to go ahead and use PyCharm for now, keeping in mind that you can really do this in either one. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, a new Python file that is, and I'm just going to call this calculator GUI. Okay. So here's my calculator GUI Python code, and I make sure I select the current file. I'm going to go ahead and run this. Voila. So here's a simple calculator program with a graphical user interface, a GUI. And it's ready to use. So let me go ahead and just do 9 times 6, for example. As you can see, as I type that, it's literally, being indicated and shown in our text box here, accepting numeric data. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit equals, and then lo and behold, 54. Awesome. So I can hit C for clear. So you can see every one of these buttons have a specific function to them. And that ties really well with what we were discussing in the previous lecture, which is that all of these buttons traditionally, you had to go ahead and literally provide the backend code, the functionality of what each of these buttons do. But now, with leveraging AI, using AI guidance, it'll do all that for you in a matter of seconds, instantly. So hence, we're boosting productivity, we're being more efficient, and we're learning to leverage AI to do basic GUI programs like this. And you can take this as far as you want. So if you wanted to upgrade this calculator program, by all means you can do so. But let's go ahead and close this. And if you wanted to just play around with the code, modify anything, you can simply go back to ChatGPT and prompt it or reprompt it and refine it as you wish. Just going back to the process of iterative refinement. All right, so now that we've looked at how to generate a calculator-based program with AI guidance, let's expand on that idea, that concept. What if I told you that you can create any type of GUI that you want using AI? Yes. And ultimately, that's the purpose of this course, is how to teach you to leverage AI for the proper aid to construct whatever GUIs you want implemented. GUIs, graphical user interfaces that would be useful to your personal interests, your programming goals, your education, or simply just your personal needs. Or it could even be for professional reasons, such as your workplace. But AI is such a powerful tool that you don't even need to be a programmer nowadays to leverage it, right? You can simply be someone who's interested in programming or interested in creating basic apps or programs and be able to just accustom yourself to the basics of AI prompt engineering and just kind of knowing the Python IDE integrated development environment. So long as you're able to accustom yourself to these basic skills, I mean, those are just tools that you can just add to your bag and then utilize them as needed. So that's ultimately the purpose of this course. And what I want to gift you with in this course is to be able to generate code for whatever type of GUI you want, and not just GUIs. I mean, this section we're looking at GUIs, but ultimately different types of programs, whether it's beginner level, intermediate, or advanced. And GUIs are an integral part of programming. So I want you to be able to go back and forth between whether you want to create a GUI or whether you just want to create a basic program that requires input and outputs or does something specific. So in this case, let's say for instance, we're going to look at some more examples to show you the power of AI and how you can really create any type of GUI that you want. So say for instance, you wanted ChatGPT to provide Python code for a BMI calculator GUI, calculator GUI. Okay. Now, BMI stands for body mass index. Okay. If you haven't heard of that, it just basically is a measure of your body mass, and it's based on certain parameters, specifically your weight and your height. So make sure you specify GUI because that makes all the difference. If you just put, please provide Python code for a BMI calculator, it's just going to give you that. But if you put, please provide Python code for a BMI calculator GUI, then it'll provide you the user interface aspect of it too, in which case, more than likely, it could use something like the tutor library, which I'm not surprised it it will use because the tutor library is a GUI-based toolkit that's built into Python, built into the Python environment. So here's the BMI calculator GUI program, and it even tells you how to use it on the bottom here if need be. Now, it looks to me that the metric system, the units here are, let's see, in centimeters and kg, kilograms, which is fine, but I'll tell you, here in the United States, we're not used to that at all. We would opt to using, pounds and feet. So I know that's probably not typical around the world, but that's how we work. But nevertheless, let's go with what was generated by AI. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file, and I'm going to call it BMI calculator. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and paste that, and I'm going to run current file here, and lo and behold, look at that. There's my cute little BMI calculator. So as I mentioned, you know, I'm not used to these units, but I believe my height in centimeters is probably somewhere around 180, and then my weight would probably be somewhere around 85. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and then my calculated BMI is somewhere around 26.23, which actually sounds about right. So I'm proud of myself for getting that right there. But yeah, that's not the best BMI. It's also not the worst. So that's about average, something I can work on, but I'm happy with it. So nevertheless, this is a BMI calculator GUI, and it's a graphical user interface that a user can interact with. So it's an interactive program. It's a little app, essentially, right? And you can enhance it. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to change the units to pounds and feet. Sure, I can do that. But that goes back to the process of refinement, which we don't need to do right now. I want to show you some other GUI examples. So let's try some other ones. Let's go back here. And this time, let's see. Let me try another one. Let's try a game. Let's say, for instance, a tic-tac-toe game, if you're familiar with that game. Now, I don't have to say, please provide a Python GUI for a tic-tac-toe program or whatever. I don't have to say that because it already knows that I'm looking for a Python GUI. Okay. Now, I just simply have to put tic-tac-toe game and check this out. And this is sort of where simplicity takes effect. So once again, here's a simple implementation of this GUI, right? A tic-tac-toe GUI. It already knows what you're trying to ask for just by typing tic-tac-toe game, because beforehand I asked for a BMI calculator GUI. So it's just going to replace that with the same concept, right? So sort of like machine learning here. It knows what you're asking for. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code, and it even tells you some instructions on how to use it. I see it talks about respective marks, X or O, so this looks exciting. I will copy this code, and I'm going to go back to PyCharm, create a new Python file again, and call this tic-tac-toe, enter that in, and paste it, and run it. Wow, look at that. Cool. So here's a little GUI. So I'm going to go ahead and play a quick game against myself here. XO, XO, XO. Whoa, look at that. Player O wins. And that's because I have O here. Cool. So there's another cool GUI, another fun one, and it also clears it out to allow you to play again. So that's really neat. And again, this is just to show you that you can create whatever GUI you want. So let's try one more. And again, there are an infinite amount of possibilities when it comes to GUI creation or Python creation, code creation in general, especially when you're talking about leveraging AI guidance. So let's try one more. Say, for instance, and again, I don't have to type the whole thing out, but I can just say now, please provide Python code for an expense tracker GUI, and I enter that in. And again, it uses the Kinter library, and it's going to go ahead and provide the code necessary to do that, and it even tells you again some instructions on the bottom. Click the add expense button to add it to the tracker. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and copy this code. I will go back to PyCharm, and I'm going to create that new file, and I'm going to call this expense tracker. Enter. Okay. And here's my expense tracker. I'm going to paste this code, and let me run it. Cool. There's a GUI right there for an expense tracker. So say, for instance, one of the expenses is a phone bill, and say the phone bill is $65. I'm going to click add expense, and it tells you expense added successfully. Cool. And I think I can add another one just by quickly glancing at the code, I think you can add as many as you want. So I'm going to say car bill, and this time I'll put, I don't know, $280. Okay, enter that in. Expense added successfully. All right, so you can see here it's basically tracking your expenses. I don't see that it's taken a total, so if you want to add that feature again, process of refinement, you can just simply prompt it and ask it to tally it up for you to give you a total in the end. But you can add as many as you want, and it basically tracks your expenses. You can even have, again, at the bottom here, like total expenses, and it'll add it up as you go along. So sky is the limit. You can really create as many GUIs as you want and enhance the features as many times as you want, refine as many times as you want to reach your desired programming goals.
So let's have AI generate some code with us using lists so that we can better understand how this works and also acknowledge how AI guidance can create sophisticated basic programs for us in a matter of seconds using these intermediate level concepts such as lists. So I'm going to go ahead and ask ChatGPT to provide a basic or just a Python program that generates a task scheduler. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter that in. And as you can see here, what it's doing is it's creating a program from what I see that will add a bunch of tasks to your liking based on what you want, and then ultimately collect it in a list form. So if you don't understand how lists are being utilized here, what you can essentially do is you can actually prompt it to request where it's being used, where lists are being used here. So what we can do is we can say, please help me identify where Python lists are being used in the code. Okay, so this is if you're not sure where they're being used. So we're going to go ahead and enter that in. And then it's going to say, as you can see in details, in the provided Python code, lists are being used in the following places. In the task scheduler class, it says self.tasks is a list used to store the tasks. It is initialized as an empty list in the constructor. Okay, so you can see here that self.tasks is your list, and we know that because, as you recall, lists does use brackets. So it tells you then that tasks are added to the list using the self tasks and using the add task method by appending a tuple, interestingly, which we'll look at more in the next example, containing task details. So tuples are immutable, whereas tasks are mutable. So here this is a function add underscore task with some arguments, and you can see that it goes ahead and adds the task accordingly under this function, which again we'll be talking about functions in more detail. But ultimately, you can see that it gives you more information. The scheduling algorithm involves popping tasks from the list self.tasks in order to schedule them. Okay, so you have a lot of fine details here as to how tasks are being utilized in this code. And if you want, you can ask about a specific line if you're not sure. But ultimately, we do see under the scheduled underscore tasks, a list is being used there as well. So we're going to go ahead and copy this code and then paste it into PyCharm so that we can look and see how it runs. So I'm going to go ahead and open PyCharm as we've formerly done, and I'll create a new Python file for the task scheduler, and using lists via AI guidance, we'll be able to get things running here and look at an actual example. So I'll create a new Python file and call it task scheduler, drop this code in, and run the current file. Okay, so there we go. So here it provides a list of the scheduled tasks. So your task name, the priority level, and the deadline of each. So you can see you have task 1, 2, 3, 4. And essentially, these are sort of predefined tasks, but you can change them to your liking. You can change them as you wish. and set them in whatever form or order that you want. So here you can see the names, task 1, 2, 3, 4. You've given them priority levels. So it's actually printing them, as you can see, in the following order: task 3, 4, task 1, task 2. You can change that information as well. So anything that you want to print, you can change the print order. You can change anything that you want. If you want to change the priority levels, you want to change any of the items that are added to the list, you can do it here yourself, or you can prompt ChatGPT to do so as well. We looked in a previous example at a task scheduler. That made sense as to why we essentially used lists there, because that's data that is subject to change. Well, what about when you deal with data that you want stored and you don't want changed? There's a ton of examples that I can think of where that type of application would be essential. And, for the purpose of what we're doing here, AI guidance, let's think of an example where we would be generating code, or AI would generate code for us that would use data that isn't mutable, that is immutable, that shouldn't be changed, right? So one thing that comes to mind would be, for example, like an employee payroll system. Because with an employee payroll system, you have sensitive data like an employee's name, their salary, their hours worked, their address. So that's information that you don't want anyone to know. And generally speaking, it would be stored in a database. It would have primary keys in like a SQL database or equivalent or a server. So it makes sense as to why you would want to use tuples there. So we're going to have ChatGPT generate code for us for an employee payroll system that uses tuples specifically. And if you want it to use tuples, you have to specifically direct it to use tuples, because if you just prompt ChatGPT and say, well, create an employee payroll system, it can do so in various ways. And ChatGPT has its limitations. So if you want to be specific and you want to use tuples, then you might want to prompt it to do so. In the previous example with the task scheduler, we got a little lucky, but let's be a little specific here and say, please provide Python code that implements an employee payroll system. Okay. Make sure to use tuples to store the employees. And you can say, just information in general. If you want specific information to be stored, you can. It's information. And you could specify, like, for example, their name, salary, hours worked. So you can specify exactly what you want, etc. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and enter it in. Remember, when prompting ChatGPT, it's very important to be specific as possible, so you can get what you want. Okay. Now, again, if you're not sure where tuples are being used here, you can simply prompt it and ask it, right? So here I can say, where are tuples being used? Okay, and it will tell you specifically the parts of your program where tuples are being used. So it tells you right there under employees, John Doe, Gene Smith, Tom Brown, and it gives you, like, for example, salary, hours worked. It gives you details in each tuple. And these are information that, again, are immutable. They're not meant to be changed, okay? And they get stored in a database securely. So we can actually copy this if you want and try it out. So we're going to go here and let's try to play around a little bit and click on Python file and call this employee payroll system. Enter that in and essentially run this code. Okay, so here you go. Payroll for John Doe, salary, hours worked, total pay, so on, so on, so on. So this is kind of like the task scheduler where it just prints a list or prints a, in this case, a tuple. And remember, with tuples, you can't change the information. It's immutable. So it wouldn't make sense to, want to change this. But if you did want to change it, there would be a way to do it. So you can ask ChatGPT to allow you to enter the information once and then store it as a tuple if you wished. So I can do that if I want. So please modify the program so that I am able to enter in the employee name and their information before they are stored in a tuple. And essentially it will do exactly that for you. There will be a little bit more code involved, obviously, because you need to have like a function to enter the employee information, which I do see right here. So that looks like new code. Great. So I made a lot of these things variable, name, salary, hours worked, and then it returns it under this input employee function. Great. So let's go ahead and we're going to modify this program. And I'm going to go ahead and just erase this. And I'm going to rerun this. And yeah, so here we go. We have, enter the number of employees. So it actually asks you how many employees are there. So for now, I'll just say 2. And then I can say the employee name. I'll just say John Doe again. And then enter the salary. Say this could be monthly salary, or rather yearly. Wow, that'd be an amazing monthly salary. And then enter the hours worked. So I can say 40 hours. Okay. And then you can do the second one. And I can say Tom Smith for the second one there. Salary, I can say 75,000. I guess, again, that's annual. So you can actually modify this to say annual salary if you wish. And I'll say 40 hours as well. And there you go. Okay. So just an example. I think this was actually, as I can see here, set to monthly, it sounded like. But you can modify this in whatever way you wish, right? So here, if you want to calculate this appropriately, you want to make sure that it specifies it. Yeah, you can have AI actually change that for you. So you can go here and you can say, modify it to specify the type of hours worked, monthly, annual, etc. Okay. And also, we also want to check actually for the salary. So, and also the salary. Okay, so let's make that a little specific. This is an interesting situation where it prompts you and it says, what response do you prefer? So here's a modified code to include an input for specifying the type of salary. And then here is another type where you can modify the input employee to accept the type of salary as well. So this is interesting. It gives you more than one version to try here. So for now, let's go with the one on the left. We'll give that a shot and take a look at how that runs. So we'll run this code, and it's pretty cool that it gave us more than one option. So again, I'll do 2 employees, John Doe, and enter employee salary. It still doesn't mention what type here, but let's just say this is monthly. But it does say enter the type after. Okay, so you can say monthly here. That's fine. But it would have been nicer for it to say enter employee salary and then monthly in parentheses. So you can do it that way too if you want. You just have to prompt it again. Enter the hours worked, 40. And that is actually weekly in this case. Okay. And then we're going to do Tom Smith again. And enter the employee salary, 6,000. And we're going to say again, oh, this is monthly and the hours worked. And this is weekly. Cool. So, yeah, those numbers, they look more accurate, but again, it tells you the total pay, but total pay for what? Is it monthly? Is it yearly? So on. So, you want to be able to be specific with ChatGPT and essentially, prompt it until you get exactly what you want. But this is a example of using tuples. Dictionaries in Python are very interesting because, the possibilities are limitless. We'll look at some or an application right now actually. One that comes to mind is like a basic language translator. So say for instance like translating words from English to Spanish. In order to do that, it would make sense to use dictionaries, right? Because you have to deal with key value pairs, right? So you have the source language, you have the target language, for instance, you have the word that you want to translate, and then the translated word. So you're dealing with dictionaries in that sense. So we're going to go ahead and work with ChatGPT for AI guidance To help us do this, and remember, ChatGPT AI Guidance is our tool that we're using here. We want to be able to leverage AI and use it properly. So we want to be able to send the right prompts in to have it do what we want it to do. And that's why it's very important for us to understand what dictionaries are, what these basic concepts are, so that we can prompt ChatGPT properly. That's why it's important to learn Python fundamentals. And in this case, we're talking about intermediate concepts, so that we can have ChatGPT essentially generate code for us that's meaningful based on what we want it to do. So I'm just going to say, please provide a Python program for a basic English to Spanish, and I'm going to be specific as to what I want here. English to Spanish language translator. Use dictionaries, and I'm just going to specify that because that's what I want it to use. Okay. So here's a basic program here, an English to Spanish dictionary program. And as you can see, it's in a very good way using dictionaries. So we're going to go ahead and try this code out. And again, if you want to know where dictionaries are being used, you can simply prompt it, where are dictionaries being used in this program? And you can simply prompt it and ask it where it's being used. So it tells you that it's being used here in the English to Spanish dictionary. Now, from what I see here, I don't think it's prompting us with the type of word, or actually it is. Enter a word or phrase in English into Spanish. Okay, cool. So that's great. Let's go ahead and try that out. I think this might work great on the first run, which is good because we won't have to refine. And again, this is just an example, but just to go and show you that you can create whatever you want. So I'm going to go ahead and stop whatever I was running before and run this code. And there you go. It says, welcome to the English to Spanish translator. Enter a word or phrase in English to translate into Spanish. Type quit to exit. So I'm going to enter words, some words or phrases. So some common words would be, for example, hello. All right, there we go. I enter in hello. Translation is hola. Awesome. And I can send in other. So the problem is right now in the dictionary, we have a limited amount of words. You can expand on that if you want, but you can see the ones that it supports are hello, goodbye, thank you, and please. You can expand on this dictionary and add more code as you want here. So say, for instance, I wanted to add well, please is already here. So say, for instance, like cat or something. I think cat is gato, right? If I'm not mistaken, my Spanish is not good. But yeah, let's go ahead and stop this. And I just went ahead and added another word here. And then if I enter cat, there it goes, translation, gato. All right, so you can expand this, as much as you want. But I think this is a pretty neat little program. We can go back to ChatGPT and have it expand the dictionary for us. So I can simply go back here and say, great. Now, please expand the dictionary to include, and you can mention how many you want. Let's make it a little bigger. So say 20 words. Okay. So now we're going to try 20 different words here. And as you can see, the dictionary is growing. Okay. So now we have a longer list, and you can simply take this if you want. You can take this function and copy it. And you only need the function, right? So we're going to basically copy this here and replace the code. Okay. So then we stop and we run the code. And now we have a lot more words. So I'm going to say yes, sí, no. Okay, so no is no. Seems like no is the same in every language. But yeah, so say for instance I wanted to enter water, agua, and so on. Okay. Yeah, so that's how you use dictionaries. That's how you apply it ultimately with the help and assistance of AI guidance. I think this is pretty neat. You can do a lot with it. Sky's the limit. You just have to think of what applications you want. Let's take the opportunity to prompt ChatGPT and have it create a program for us that utilizes sets. So again, it's important for us to understand these basic fundamentals in the intermediate concept section that we're talking about here, so that we're able to prompt ChatGPT properly. So learning more about each of these data structures and then applying it accordingly in our AI guided platform here makes a lot of sense, because now you can prompt ChatGPT better and get more for your ask. So I'm gonna ask ChatGPT to provide a Python program, and I want to think of something where sets would be applicable. So think of something that makes sense. So, we talk about the idea of intersection. So I'm thinking of like a long URL and a short URL. So something where it can shorten URLs for you. I think that's a pretty cool application. It doesn't have to use API keys or anything complex like that. That's for the more advanced section when we talk about web development. But let's just do something basic. So provide a Python program that functions as, or that runs as a URL shortener. Okay. It accepts an original URL and shortens the URL with, and you could specify the type of format you want, HTTPS format. And then you can also say, make sure this program uses Python sets. Okay. All right. So let's see what it's going to give us there. I'm trying to get it right on the first run. Now, again, if you want to know where sets are being used, you can simply prompt it, where are sets being used? Okay. And it'll tell you basically exactly where the sets are being used. I mean, it does seem pretty apparent here, but it'll tell you that. Oh, I actually forgot to. Okay, so I actually did modify it to use sets more. It appeared that it had already, but so now you can have it. So now you can actually prompt it, and okay, so here we can ask it. It's saying the program checks if it already exists in the set to prevent duplicates. If it's not in the set, it adds the URL. So that's better. So now it actually does use sets a little better. So you can actually prompt it again. Where exactly in the code does it make use of sets? Okay. All right. So now it's providing you modified code. I renamed self URLs attribute to self URL set to better reflect its purpose. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and give this a shot. We're going to copy the code and bring it over to Python. And we're going to create a Python file, and we're just going to call URL shortener. And let's run this. So we need to grab an original URL. I had a URL prepared. We can just grab URL from one of my courses and apply it here, run it, and there we go. So it created a shortened URL, and you can enter as many as you want. It looks like it's in a while loop, so you can enter as many as you want. But here's a pretty cool example of how to use sets. So you can see here, this is one of the steps here, self.url underscore set add original URL, where it essentially adds it to the set and modifies it so that it returns a short URL. So just a basic example of sets here, and you can modify it as you wish. Now, this shortened URL won't work because, again, we're not using like API keys or anything like that, but it just goes to the extent of giving you a shortened URL. So you can take that and actually apply it to a online URL tool if you want, or you can essentially use API keys and integrate this higher level if you wish. All right, so now that we've went through all the different data structures, we looked at lists and tuples and dictionaries and sets, and we looked at how to work with functions. Let's apply a program that uses functions heavily. And let's look at an example there, be able to read it and, sort of dissect it, deconstruct it, run it, make sense of it, and how it works with AI guidance, of course. So I'm gonna think of a program that uses functions heavily. You want to think of something that needs to perform many different types of tasks. So one thing that comes to mind is like a file management tool. So something that can manage files, it can create a new file, edit files, delete files, things like that, right? Because each one of those need to have a function. So we're gonna ask ChatGPT to create a file management tool program for us and see where that goes. You can ask it to use functions to create it, but most likely, more than likely, it will already do so. So we're gonna go ahead and just prompt it right away. So develop a file management tool in Python. Okay, so just develop a Python or file management tool program in Python, and you can make it as simple as that to start. Let's see how that looks for us. Okay. All right. So as you can see, there's a lot of defs there, a lot of definitions, which, as I said, makes a lot of sense for this type of application. So yeah, basically it says here's the simple file management tool in Python that allows users to perform basic file operation like creating, deleting, and listing files in a directory. Excellent. All right, so it's going to import OS to make sense, and then we're going to create a function for creating a file. Then there's another one for deleting a file. Then there's another one for listing files, and so on. And there's a main. Okay, the main looks to be where you enter your choice. Do you want to create a file, delete a file, list files, or exit? So we're going to play around with this a little bit. And I can see depending on what you enter in, it's going to either do one or the other. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and copy this code and try it out as an example of looking at functions. And if you want to understand any of these functions and what they do, you can prompt it. So for instance, if I want to understand what does the create file function do exactly? Okay, so you can specifically ask it, since you know that create file is a function, what it does. Then it tells you the create file function is responsible for creating a new file with the specified file name. Here's a breakdown of what the function does. And it tells you it takes one parameter, file name, which is the name of the file to be created, and then so on and so on and so on. It tells you everything that it does about that function. Okay. Now we're going to go here and we're going to create a new Python file, call it file management tool, copy and paste this in here, run it, and the first thing that it'll prompt me is file management tool, create file, delete file, list files, exit. So enter your choice. Okay, so I'm going to enter, let's start with creating a file. So I'm going to enter one. Enter the name of the file that you want to create. Now, I believe by default what it's going to do is whatever file you enter in here, it's going to create it in your Python lib folder. So say we call, say we create a file called test file, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and enter that in. Now it went ahead and inform me file, test file created successfully. Well, how do I know that? I'm gonna search for test file, see if anything comes up. Test file. Yeah, there it is, test file. I don't think it was case sensitive. Yeah, I think it just defaulted to lowercase, but nevertheless. Oh, okay, it did actually camel case it for us. That's cool. So there it is. As you can see, it was created on 225, 338. Well, now it's 3:39 p.m. But yep, it just created it a minute ago. And yeah, so let's say we want to delete this now. So let's go back and let's try to delete that. So delete file. Enter the name of the file to delete. So again, we'll type in test file. Enter. File test file deleted successfully. Let's go back and verify that it has been deleted. And boom, it's gone. Awesome. So this is working really good. Now we can list the files too. So I'm going to just go ahead and enter 3 and enter the directory path. So this is if you want to enter the directory path. Let's see what happens here. So we can just enter that in, and there it goes. It gives me a list of all the files that exist in that directory. So this is pretty neat. Now, because we learned how to use GUIs. If you want, you can enhance this program. So you can say enhance this program so that it has a graphical user interface GUI. Okay. And it's going to go ahead and use Kinter as we have used before, and it'll probably do everything with message boxes right now because I do see a bunch of message boxes. And I'm just trying to show you an enhanced, refined version of this file management tool if you want something that's more interactive with the user. So I'm going to copy this code, go here, and let's bring this down a little bit. And yeah, we're going to try this out this time as a GUI. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. And there we go. Now we have a little cute GUI and you can enter in the file name and the directory of where you want this to happen. So say for instance, I'll go back here, I'll select the directory, and if I want to just list the files, it gives me the files. Okay. And if I want to go back here and I want to create a new file, I'm going to call it just a test file. Okay, we'll just call it that. Create file, and it does prompt me success file, just a test file created successfully. Hit OK, and you know what we can do is we can just go ahead and list the files again. And as you can see, there it is, just a test file is right there. And if I go to the directory, it is shown there, just a test file. All right, so that's just an enhanced approach there, using iterative refinement and using graphical user interface technology or elements to give us something more meaningful. So as you can see, as we're going along with the course, we're building blocks and using AI guidance at a higher level. So feel free to apply this and play around with ChatGPT for your own purposes so you can get ultimately the level of experience necessary that you're looking for.
Now, more than ever, we're witnessing a remarkable growth in artificial intelligence. It's not just a buzzword anymore, it's a transformative force shaping industries worldwide. And knowing how to harness this power is not just advantageous, it's essential for career advancement. By incorporating AI into programming tasks, we're unlocking an infinite amount of opportunities. The future of programming is undeniably intertwined with AI. Those who embrace this technology and master its application will undoubtedly have a competitive edge in the job market. While it's true that AI may disrupt traditional job roles, those who learn to collaborate with AI rather than resist it will find themselves in a position of strength. Instead of being replaced, they'll become indispensable assets in their respective fields. Don't view AI as a threat. Rather, see it as an invaluable tool that can elevate your skills and open doors to exciting new opportunities. Remember, the future is bright for those who embrace innovation. Don't let AI control your job. Rather, let your job control AI.